Okay, so now we can take a look at the rest of these class methods. So we're still in the class now, the order line item class, and we're told to code these additional methods. So, and you know what, this is where it's, I think the trickiest part is, like I said before in another video, is that like having to translate the written words into code. But basically, I'll summarize it here. To get the quantity of cakes and suggest a quantity of cakes to the user, we're going to ask how many guests, and then we're going to divide that number of guests by the number of servings. Each cake has a set number of servings, we already said, depending on their size and shape. Some are 16, some are 18, some are, more or less. And so we're going to divide the number of guests by the number of servings, and then, of course, round up, because the caterer does not sell a fraction of a cake. So we're going to have to use math.ceil, and I did import math in this program. You see that? Can't forget that. So where is it? Okay, so here we are. So we're going to get the user's input on the number of guests. Notice how I'm converting that to an integer as the input comes in. And really the suggested quantity I'm calculating is just using the roundup, the math.ceil, dividing the number of guests by the number of servings. So look, again, I can't stress this enough. Don't forget that when you're referencing a private attribute of the class, or a class attribute in general, you have to do self dot and then that attribute. Okay, so it's going to be the number of servings, which was initialized by the constructor. That's the number of servings are already there in this object because they came through the door of the constructor, and we initialized the private attribute there. So dividing the number of guests by the number of servings. Okay. And now, so this is just the suggested quantity, and we're going to ask the user, do you want to order this or not? This is the suggested quantity. So if they say yes, then I will set the QTY quantity attribute, the private attribute, to the suggested quantity. Okay? If they say no, then I'm going to set the quantity to whatever they say. Okay, maybe it's just one cake, two cakes, whatever, but that'll give the user a chance to override the suggested quantity and enter a custom quantity. Okay, so either way, we're setting that private data or that private attribute there. Okay, so now I have these four set. Okay, 3 of them were handled by the constructor, and then we just did the quantity. Next up is the coffee charges. Now the coffee will be a little easier than the quantity. That was, and I can pull up the exam instructions as well. But basically, it's just $1.25 per serving per the number of servings of the cake. But keep in mind, if the user orders 3 cakes, then it's the number of servings for that cake times 3 times 125. So you have to just be mindful of that. So the coffee charges, private attribute there, are going to be $1.25 times the number of servings for the cake times the quantity of the cake. Okay. And that's if they wanted coffee. I started off by asking them, do you want the coffee? And if that's yes, then those are the coffee charges. Or else, very important to set that to no, because we have to have something, or set that to zero, I should say. If they say no, set the coffee charges to 0, because something has got to be in the private attribute. You can't just leave that as nothing or null. It's got to at least have a 0 in it. Okay, if they don't want coffee. Okay, and then finally the total cost. That is the calc total method. And so we're just going to set the total cost attribute to the quantity of the cake they're ordering times the unit price of that cake plus the coffee charges, if any. And if there aren't any, then we're just going to add a 0 to that, and it'll have no effect. So yeah, those are really, I think that's like the trickiest part of this assignment, is just getting all those methods in place probably. And then lastly, we have just a line to print the line item. So this print statement here, that's part of the class, and that translates to this line of output or this line of output. Okay, so printing the line item for the order receipt. Okay, so those are the methods. I think I'm going to end this video and then, oh, you know what? Before I end this video, let me just also mention in the specs here, we are told to add properties, class properties for each of the private attributes using the property decorator. This is just kind of busy work, but I am going to want this on the real test as well. Just adding properties so we can access those private attributes if we need to. You don't have to add setters to this. You just don't. I mean, that's just part of this exercise that I don't think we need them. But definitely just at least some properties to be able to access those as read-only values if we need to. Okay, so I'm going to end this here, and then we'll talk about the main function.